All right. Well, to kick off, I'm going to hand it over to Natalie and Risa. We should have an air horn.
Yeah, we should. So everyone should know Risa, and she's usually the one asking us questions. So we thought she would be a good person to have for our lightning round questions. So you ready, Risa?
Ready.
Okay. First question. Scale of 1 to 10. How good are you at keeping secrets?
I think I'm a 9.
Okay.
There could be an occasion where something needs to be told, but a 9.
Good. Good for an HR person, right? Your first celebrity crush.
John Grisham. He was my Sunday school teacher.
Shout out to Mississippi.
The John Grisham?
The John Grisham.
Wow. Okay.
Born and raised Mississippi.
Dawn or dusk?
Dusk.
If you could travel back in time, what period would you go to?
Ooh, the 70s. Well, I was born in the 70s, so that really doesn't count, does it? Like, I think I would like to be a teenager in the 70s for the music.
Oh, gotcha. That's a good one.
Yeah.
Place you most want to travel?
Italy.
Favorite junk food?
Oh, God, you have to ask me this now while I'm on Whole30.
I know, I'm sorry.
Cheese and crackers.
That's not junk food.
Okay,
That's
so like junk food. Okay.
Yeah.
Like if I want to go really hardcore, it might be like Doritos or something, like Cool Ranch Doritos.
Yeah, there you go. That's good summer food too. Favorite childhood TV show?
Oh, gosh. Three's Company.
Okay. Favorite season?
Fall.
I know you don't want this question either. Cake or pie?
Red velvet cake.
Okay. Last question. What was your last Halloween costume? Some of us know the answer to this if we were.
God, it's probably been since college, but I was a cat. Go figure.
Okay. Those questions were too hard, were they?
No, they weren't too brutal. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you for doing that for us. And everyone on the call, be careful because I may ask you to do it too.
She's coming for you.
All right. Thank you so much, Risa and Natalie. I'm going to turn it over to, before I turn it over to Mark, I'm going to share my screen here. Again, we're super excited to do these weekly webinars at 1, not 3. So we have one coming up next week, and then we have, to kick off the beginning of July, we have our new deal overview for the Crossing Center. And then we should be able to have the next month scheduled webinars ready and available for you guys to look at and see.
Can I plug our Tiny Pulse question?
Of course.
If you haven't answered a Tiny Pulse question, definitely do that, because any input you put in there about educational topics that you'd like to know about could have to do with your role or not. Definitely put that in Tiny Pulse and we'll use those for our webinars.
Great. So that we also pull a lot of the information from Tiny Pulse. So please do that. I'm going to hand it over to Mark, and we're going to talk about the criterion inspection reports that have been as of recent. And with that being said, Mark, let's get started.
Well, let's just jump into quick how we got to the criterion reports and what problem we're trying to solve from kind of the history of Greenleaf. So 5 years ago or so, when we were doing capital projects, we would sit down with the operations side, we'd sit down with the CapEx side and the investment side, and then try and come up with like, okay, what do we want to do with this asset, and what do we think's wrong with it, or what issues do we see? And what we found out was every time we would do them, we would learn something, and we kind of take those learnings for granted at this point. We don't realize like kind of where they came from sometimes. A big part of that is like we camera all of our lines, and that's something we do routinely now. But we only camera the lines now because when we bought deal number 6, we're on deal 104 or 5 or something. But when we bought deal number 6, we didn't camera the lines. And then we closed and we're looking around, we're like, man, this is just really weird that none of the toilets flush. And it's like, well, all the sewer lines are collapsed. That would have been helpful to know before we, purchased it and had to figure out what to do. So we're like, hey, maybe we should camera the sewer lines every time we buy something. And we add that into the little checklist of things to do. Fast forward through many of those learning opportunities. And now we're at this point with the criterion report, where instead of us going out, we're still doing those parts, right? We're still cameraing the lines. We're still doing property walks. We still have our roofers go out. But we've taken it a step further. And what Mark's going to walk through is hiring an actual engineering firm that's not us, right? It's not someone internal. Hiring an external engineering firm that all they do is do inspections like this. Like this is their specialty. And by doing that, it gives us a very good third-party professional opinion of things that have to be done, not only from the investment side, the finance, the structure side, operationally, CapEx-wise. They give us a really good picture of the current asset state and what we have to do. One thing, as an example, is we're looking at the new deal on Memorial Drive that was blue sky. We're calling it East Lake Crossing, and they came to the determination that some of the electrical lines from Georgia Power looked like they were faulty. So we had to put in our budget like, hey, we have to get new electrical lines from Georgia Power. That's something we have never done before. It's not something we would have known to look for. So it was one of those like, oh, wow, that's super helpful. We can now go look into that ahead of time as opposed to being on site and getting hit with kind of a curveball in the middle of a project. So that's why we're here today. Mark is going to go into this criterion report and what all we've learned from it and how it works. And we hope it gives us a very good head start as we get into projects. So I'll turn it over to Mark and he's going to go through everything with you here.
What's up, everyone? I hope everybody's having a good day. So yeah, the criterion inspection report that everyone keeps referring to, I think a lot of times internally we just call it the criterion report, is, as you can see here, a third-party objective opinion from a professional engineering firm. And that's what criterion is. They're a group of professionally licensed contracted engineers that work for criterion all over the country, right? And so as Dave, not to repeat everything he said, but what this is simply an evolution of Greenleaf and our acquisition process. Many of you will remember what our inspections looked like before. The one that sticks out of my head is I can't see Steph or James, but if you guys remember the inspection we did over on Troy Street, where we went in.
That was a fun one.
With our guns in our hands.
Yeah,
Yes.
that was
I
that was an
remember.
experience. We took a herd of people. We had at least 12 Greenleafers there, right, to do that inspection. Just the evolution. We didn't know what we didn't know. That's how we were doing them then. And this criterion engineering report is how we're doing our inspections now. The last one that I went on was the one for Crossing Center that Dave mentioned a few minutes ago in Marietta. That property is 5 buildings, 5 individual standalone buildings, about 130,000 square feet. Yeah, something like that. 3 of us, 3 Greenleaf people went, right? Me, Wendy, and yeah, 1 other person, right? So there's 3 people. So we went from 12 to 3, right? But the caveat of going from 12 to 3, I think the information that we're getting now from this engineering firm is light years better than we were getting when we sent 12 people, right, to the inspection. And not discredit any of those 12 people, but we didn't know what we didn't know, right? No offense to Natalie, but Natalie looking at a storm drain versus a professional engineer looking at a storm drain, or looking at, how many times has this parking lot been sealed and striped over, right? Looks great to us. This engineer is going to tell us, oh, you got to mill and overlay, tear it all up, re-pour it. So it's just the evolution of how we were doing them then versus how we're doing them now. a couple of the bullet points here I'll hit on. The first one I already mentioned, it's a third-party professional objective opinion. And another big benefit, not only are they telling us some of the capital needs that we need to do on the property, it's also helping align our internal teams, right? A lot of times in years past, we would go perform these inspections and, we're all looking out, obviously, for our own best interest, right, of our division of the organization, right? Accounting wants the property to cash flow after acquisition, right? Acquisitions and investment team want it to be able to pay out investors, and we want to close the deal, right? So we can own it and begin operating it. The investors, want their have their interest in mind, right? And then operations, me and James P. and Lisa don't want things to break as soon as we're handed the property, right? So what this engineering company has afforded us the opportunity to do is really get in alignment of, okay, this unbiased guy that we don't know has come in and given us a professional opinion of the roof, right? So it's not me, it's not Dave or Josh or Nathan saying this roof is okay or we need to replace the roof, right? This is someone with years of experience professionally evaluating the roof and saying, I think you need to replace this roof in 5 years, right? So it's really helped bring alignment with our internal teams. So everyone's on the same page and we agree this report is giving us, setting us up for success for the life of this deal. So obviously the third bullet point here, it helps us forecast our capital needs. We'll show a cost table in a few minutes of what the engineers provide to us, but what they provide to us is what they internally refer to as a property condition assessment. So a PSA, right? They're essentially just giving us an all exhaustive list of capital needs that this property has. So they start from immediate to 10 years from now, and they tell us, all right, from our professional viewpoint, here's all of the things from a capital maintenance standpoint, repair and replacement that you guys need to do. And here's how we would break them out. Here's how we would associate costs to them. And then these last four, this report that we get literally impacts all of these pieces of the operation for us. It's not just something that we use through the acquisition process to create a model. We really use it for all of these pieces of the business for every asset that we buy going forward. It helps Nathan and Avi and those guys when they're putting the acquisition model together from an operations and accounting standpoint. When Rhett and I are looking at the cash flow model, right, these capital needs we can build into them for future months and future years. And then obviously we can take their 10-year capital plan and then look at our reserve plan, right? So at the end of the month, when we close the books, hopefully we've made money, and we take some of that money and we put it into a savings account for future CapEx spend, right? And for next year's budget and on down the line, we can forecast right now in year 7. I could tell you if we are going to be properly funded to, let's say, replace 3 HVAC units that we think are going to go out because they will have surpassed their useful life, right? 12 to 15 years for an HVAC unit. We can forecast right now if we're going to have enough money for that or not, right? So it's very impactful from an ongoing operation standpoint, far after we've acquired the property.
Very interesting. Mark, when do we order this criteria report? At what part in the deal life cycle does this happen?
We'd love to order it the day Nathan goes and tours it, right? We'd love to know exactly what's going on the property. But we obviously can't do that for obvious reasons. But this timeline that Dominic's put together here on the screen, you can see this is a synopsis, a condensed timeline of when we first look at a deal to when we actually acquire it, and Stephanie's on the ground operating it, right? We go from an LOI period where we say, hey, broker, we do in fact want to buy this. We'll offer this much, and here's our terms. There's some negotiation. We eventually go under contract where Josh and Dave are putting their name down and Greenleaf's name down that we are going to buy this property. As soon as we go under contract is when I make a phone call to Criterium and order this inspection. in general, we've used them a dozen times now. So generally they're already teed up. They know that we're looking at a property in Marietta. They know it's 7 buildings. They know the age. They know, the style, right? Do they need a ladder to access the roofs, or is there, roof access, things like that. They are already aware.
What was the first one we did this on?
The very first deal that we did this on, Dominic and I looked this up the other day, was Palmetto Place in Anderson. So we've been doing it for a little over 16 months, right before COVID is when we first started using Criterium. And it is actually on Summit Grove, which we ended up not buying down in Conyers. We did an inspection on this property, and then COVID, obviously shut our world down. We ended up not buying that property. But that was the first one we did. The first one that we performed that we actually acquired was Palmetto Place. So every deal from Palmetto Place forward, we've been using Criterium Engineers. Steph and James and I've talked at length about how great we're doing things now, but how, it doesn't really help retroactively, right? We can't go back and reacquire some properties that already own or redo a CapEx plan. But that's part of what I love about what we do and about Greenleaf. I had a conversation with some of our team members, Wendy and Lisa, about, we're part of helping with these growing pains and with evolving how we're doing things then versus how we're doing them now. This engineering report is pivotal for every property, every asset that we buy going forward because of the objectivity of it, right? So back to this timeline, as soon as we go on a contract, we order the report because we want to get on the property with an engineer as quickly as possible. To do this physical inspection, it takes them about 10 days to turn a report back around to us. So that's them gathering information from municipalities, from surveys, and then, putting all of their report findings together and getting it back to us.
Speaking of the impact that this has had, and now that this is a part of the process, can you speak a little bit more about, or give an example of how this has impacted one of our recent acquisitions?
Yeah, for sure. So we've got several maintenance techs on this phone call, and you might be thinking like, why do we need to use a professional engineer to do this, right? Why can't, you guys have been doing property maintenance, for years, right? I mean, between you guys, we have, more knowledge for repair and maintenance and property operation than I can fathom. You might be saying, why do we need somebody else to do this? Why don't we just do it ourselves, right? It's a good question, but one is because you guys have priorities on properties that we already own, right? And a professional licensed engineer is going to look at things a little differently than we would look at them, right? This professional engineer is going to look at them from a standpoint of he or she does not know Greenleaf, does not know any of our investors, right? So they're not going to be biased or impacted by any of our history, right? They're not going to be thinking about deal number 32 when they're looking at 106, right? It's a complete objective opinion. And in this case, with 1824 in Durham, North Carolina, it's a Veteran Affairs Medical Center. We just closed on this a couple months ago. So we did this inspection like 6 months ago. What we did not know when we originally stepped foot on this property is that it's on a suspended slab. So there's a crawl space, right? You can't tell from just walking around the exterior of the property that there's a crawl space, because the only way into the crawl space is obvious from the interior. There's some vents, from the exterior that were clogged, right? All of the vent wells that would, vent the crawl space were clogged with years of just debris and leaves and stuff, right? So the engineer saw that and he's like, I need to go in the crawl space. All right. So he goes and gets knee pads and puts his coveralls on and goes and gets dirty under there and finds that all of the vent wells were clogged, therefore no airflow was getting under the crawl space. Most of the steel structure had rust and decay all over them, right? So there were more structural damage to the underneath the slab than we would have ever noticed, right? you know, I've been on several of these inspections before. I've never been crawling in a crawl space, right? This engineer had absolutely no problem doing it. And I don't either, right? If I'm properly dressed or if I have proper boots on, but that's not
Or
gonna be,
know it's there to even go.
yeah, exactly, or even know it's there. I mean, he was surprised to find that there was a crawl space because we didn't know. But what he found were a lot of structural steel repairs were needed. We need a full new vapor barrier underneath underneath the building. We need to replace all of the cast iron pipes to PVC. And there was no backflow preventer on the property at all, which by code is required. It wasn't when this property was built, but it is now required by code. You just never would have noticed those things just from us walking around the property.
Everyone on like the Park Hill property, that's our 22nd deal. And when we purchased that property, it didn't have any backflow preventers because it didn't, whatever, when they put it together, they didn't need them. But we didn't know that. We bought it and we're like, oh, by the way, the pressure is sky high in all these buildings. And now the city wants us to go across the board and put in all these backflow preventers. We went and did it, but then it became a little bit of a fire drill because we didn't know we had to do it. And all of a sudden the city comes in and says, oh, you guys need to do this right now. And it's like, we have some other stuff.
Yeah.
You know, one more emergency on top of it isn't super helpful. So hopefully this, you know, we know we got to replace the pipe. So, okay. It's not a surprise now.
Well, yeah, and knowing it on the front end before we acquire, in this case, allowed us to negotiate with the seller a discount on buying the property, right? So rather than Greenleaf go and spend $250,000 on changing out these pipes to PVC, right, and putting in this new vapor barrier, the backflow preventer, and you know, a handful of other things that were uncovered, we were able to negotiate that through the due diligence process, right? So we can get this report, we can internally evaluate it, and then Josh or Nathan or whomever's working with the seller can go, hey, look, you know, our professional engineer provided us this report, and it says that you guys or we need to make these repairs. We can either take it off of the purchase price, or you guys can just pay us directly for it. So it gives us leverage that we wouldn't have had in a negotiation without contracting this engineer to do this report. So in this case, it did, in fact, you know, call it savings or call it expenses that we did not incur of about $250,000 on this acquisition.
What about, I know we have a couple of deals in the pipeline that if you were a part of our 1031 webinar a couple of weeks ago, you probably would be in the know about. Can you walk us through how we would use this for 6160 Peachtree Dunwoody that's up and coming?
Yep, so if you can see the cost table that's on the screen, I know it may be small because it's trying to show you 11 years worth of data on this sheet. 6160 Peachtree Dunwoody is a medical office building that we're buying in Atlanta. It's not a very large property, and it's in pretty good shape. So you can see on this report, it doesn't have a whole lot of work needed, right? It's structurally in good shape, right? We need to replace a couple of HVAC units, right? But it's not in bad shape. We'll show you the next one, which has a good bit more on it. But as you can see, we're kind of in the middle of your screen. You see immediate, short-term, year 1, year 2, and then all the way out to year 10. We get a cost table like this for every one of these inspections that we perform, and they associate every improvement or every replacement that we need to perform. They break it out for us, and they associate a probable cost to each item. They use a data bank called RS Means, which is pretty well known in the construction world of estimating cost, right, across literally anything in construction. So it's a pretty good database for real-time cost, right? We've done a dozen of these before, and I think we did the math one time, and they've been spot on, right? If they've been under on cost, it's been within like 5%, which is pretty good, in construction or repair and maintenance. So this table really helps us just know what's coming up. So we have adopted an internal process with this cost table of hands down, without question, every single time going forward, we are going to perform and execute everything in these first 3 rows. So everything that they recommend that we do for immediate repair, that's in short term year 1 or in year 2, we raise money and we do all of that work up front every single time, right? So you might ask, that sounds great, why is that important? Well, that curbs the, like Dave said a minute ago, the daily fire that as soon as we buy this property, Steph's getting a call that toilet's backing up, right? Or 6 months later, there's a leak from the roof and Lisa's getting a call because the tenant is upset that there's water soaking up their drop ceiling and water's all over the conference table, right? If we know, if it's in this report that we need to put a new TPO roof down, we're just gonna do it, no questions asked, right? And that is 100% to set Greenleaf up for success in the future and the property, right? So we're curbing any opportunity, right? Well, maybe not any,
Just
95% of an opportunity for something to come up in the future.
it greatly reduces our short-term risk.
And we're not picking and choosing what to do on this list.
Yeah, that's correct now. Yeah, like no one's saying, hey, well, I just don't like this one number. We're not gonna do that one. It's like, because that one number is important to someone on our team, right? It might not be as important to someone else, but it's important to someone on our team. So we're doing all the items that are on this list in the first 2 years to make sure that we put all the properties we purchase in a good footing to hold for the long term.
Is there anything you want to say about the crossing center's cost table?
Yeah, so the crossing center cost table, she just flipped over to it here.
Well, this is a deal that we're gonna do the webinar on for July 1st.
Mhm.
So we'll have a lot more information on what this deal is July 1st. We'll walk through the whole deal. This is like a little sneak peek of some of the CapEx that we're gonna be doing there.
Yep, so crossing center is over Marietta. This is the one I referenced as 5 individual buildings. It has a lot of shared space with neighboring properties that we don't own. But through the acquisition process, through due diligence, our beloved Sarah Williams helped us find some additional responsibilities that we did not know that we had, right? Had she not gone, had she not been, involved as much as she always is, involved with the title works, right? So one thing that I learned is that we share an entrance with another RE/MAX or like a residential real estate office, and then a bank at the back of the property, right? So we share the same entrance. But guess who's responsible for all repair and maintenance?
The bank.
No, absolutely
Not the bank.
not right.
Who guessed the bank?
Yeah. Who guessed anyone other than Greenleaf? Yes, Greenleaf is the winner, and we are responsible for all repair and maintenance of this common shared entrance, of course, right? So if you were to just drive over there, you'd be like, oh, this looks great. This is really nice. And it does look that way as you come in the property, but as the further you go back, you'll notice that there's some great contour to the asphalt parking lot. And in some places, the asphalt has been resealed and covered up so many times that it's as deep as my hand, right? So concrete curb and gutter is on the side. The asphalt up that curb and gutter is about that tall, right? So think about the, trip hazards and the cracks in that over the years, right? So I bring that up to say there's in the short term, year 1 on this cost table, there is a line item for $160,000, but that is to mill, tear up and then re-pour this entire parking lot, because this professional engineer says, hey, I've seen, I can see that they've redone this 4 times. You cannot just overlay it a 5th time, right? You'll have a nightmare on your hand, and it just won't structurally work, right? If you're gonna own this property for anything longer than 30 days, right, which we plan to, you should redo this parking lot, right? So it's things like that come up through this process that this engineering engineering report is not only helpful with us kind of coming up with a capital plan or coming up with how much money we're going to spend, it helps us through the title work of knowing, what we do and don't need to do. It helps us with, literally it touches every department in our company, right? It's not just the acquisitions team and the accountants, right? It literally touches every division of the company.
Well, I certainly learned a lot. We will, thank you so much, Mark, for sharing your insight and really letting everybody know on the team that this is something that is, one, a process being upheld moving forward, and two, how much of an impact it has. So we're going to break it out to some questions. Should any of you want to know a little bit more about this process or have any specific questions about the criterion reports in general? So if anybody wants to unmute themselves, we can get started.
Our way.
I have a question. How much do these reports cost?
How much do they cost? It varies based on how much work they have to do, right? How much time they think they're going to spend on the property. But relative to what we're provided from a report standpoint, the amount of data they provide to us, it's almost irrelevant, right? I shouldn't say irrelevant what it costs, but it's
Well worth it.
it is well worth it. It generally costs between $3,000 and $5,000 per property, right? The one that the last two we did, $3,500, $3,200, right? So if we go back to 1824, the one that Dominique highlighted a little while ago, if we spent $3,000 and an overnight trip for me up to Durham to do this inspection, and then we got that much data that we could then negotiate $250,000 off the purchase price, I would say that's worth it, right?
And now we upfront budget for these inspections from the
Yep.
onset.
Yep, it's included in our closing cost estimate, part of our acquisition closing cost every deal now.
So is it shared with the whole team then? The
The
report?
cost of the report.
No, not the cost, but
The report, yes.
The end
it's-
report, like, is everyone getting it?
Yep, it's in Asana on the property page, available for anyone to see it. So you can go through the entire list. They provide more data than just this cost table. They go in to break down every, HVAC unit by tonnage, manufacturer date, right? All of the electricals, right? They go through, are the outlets GFCI anywhere near water, right? They go down to that kind of a level in this report along with pictures. So yeah, it's available for anyone to see.
So if you're on last week, when we're talking about the verdant thermostats we're taking the information from this report on what the types of HVAC units are and putting it into that system. That's where we're getting that information. So it also feeds other parts of what we're doing, which is interesting.
Yeah, I have one question. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Do they provide any warranties, or if they miss something, what are the implications of that?
So they don't provide any warranties, obviously, because they're not executing any of the physical work. They're just giving a report based on their findings. And a lot of times they will have disclaimers in the report, like, hey, based on let's say the HVACs, right? Based on our professional opinion of a useful life, 12 to 15 years, our recommendation is that you replace anything that's outside of that list, right? We don't guarantee, let me back up. Let's say they go on a property and a unit that was manufactured in 1999 is operating properly, right? They see no problems with that unit. It just happens to be working perfectly, but it was built in 1999. So the likelihood of it continuing to operate properly for another 10 years is not likely. So they are recommending that we replace that unit, even though it's working fine, even though there's not showing any signs of repair. They're saying, we recommend replacing that unit. If you don't, it's going to go out because it was built in 1999 and it's 2021. So,
Yeah, purely a numbers game.
yeah.
Do they
No.
ever recommend like another step of inspection on anything?
Uh,
Or would they?
They would if they see something that like, hey, I recommend you get a civil engineer out here because you got a big grading problem with water, and how property, the storm drain is not doing what it's supposed to, right? So they may recommend getting a civil engineer or something out there. For this crossing center deal that we did recently, it wasn't their recommendation, but we thought it was important. We got a complete separate roofing inspection to come out, a roofer to come out there and give their opinion on all of roofs. So Dent Law with Baker Roofing that Leslie and Lisa out here at the station know well. He came over and gave a full report on each individual roof and told us if they were good, bad, do we need repair or replacement.
Mark, I have a quick question. Is Criterium, is that a company or is that just like an industry standard report name? Like what they're doing, the inspections, it's a Criterium report? Or is this a specific company?
Good question. It is a company. They're headquartered up in Maine, right? So I have a contact with Criterium. He works out of their corporate office. I think it's Rockport, Maine. It's the same place that LL Bean is headquartered, coincidentally.
Which is Freeport, Maine.
Freeport. I was close. Freeport.
Well, I'm like, oh, it's right.
It's on the cup. Well, believe it or not, this came from him. He gave me this. That's why I know this. Yeah.
I was like, this is so random.
How did we find them?
Through a GC recommended. We approached a GC like, hey, we're doing physical inspections on properties. They're working, but we'd like to kind of ramp up or
Improve what we're doing.
improve
How do we
what
do
we're
it better?
doing. Yeah, and he's like, hey, I got a guy that I recommend you talk to. So I called him and had a couple conversations, and I kind of explained to him what we were looking for, and then that's when we came across the property condition assessment is exactly what we were looking for at the time. So Criterium is a company that recruits individual operating engineers, right? So let's say our guy's name that we've used several times is named Glenn Solly. He was a single shop engineer in a small town outside of Auburn, Alabama. Criterium recruited him to come work as a contract employee for them, right? So he's 1099 with Criterium. We have a contract with Criterium, and then they have a contract with individual professional engineers, right? So the guys that we use generally are local to the south. Glenn's in Opelika, Alabama, and the other guy that we've used recently was from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. He flew over for an inspection.
And do they do all types of assets, not just commercial or office?
Their specialty or expertise is in commercial, but they have done residential for us. They did Blue Sky, East Lake apartments for us, which were a challenge for Glenn. If you've been to East Lake, it's a challenge for all of us, just, walking on the property.
Yeah, just kidding.
But yeah, Glenn did that inspection for us. And almost on the residential side, it's almost a little bit, I would say probably a little bit easier for them because they can take their findings from one building and kind of just extrapolate it for the number of units that you have. So.
Mark, I had a thought when you were talking.
So I'll
Steph,
say,
were you saying something?
Yeah. Is my microphone messed up?
speak up for us, Steph. We can hear you.
How about now?
A little better.
A little bit? Okay. It's this. My laptop microphone's broken. When you were talking about like finding the issues with the crawl space being cluttered, my thought was like those findings just like pay for the value of that report, And then my other thought too, listening to the stories was, you know, most of these new deals coming on could be part of the employee ownership fund properties. And then how great that is, knowing like most of us on this call are in that employee ownership fund, and we're getting really good product, you know, with the money that we've put in.
100%. That's a great point. The reports pay for themselves tenfold, almost immediately.
Yeah, we're all thinking Rosecroft, Glendale.
Oh, yeah. Well, I can't tell you how many times James and staff have been in my office and they're like looking at me. I'm like, I can only tell you that we're getting better, right? Like we're doing it right now. Like we did, of course, you know, miss some things in the past, right? The station here, we bought this property a couple months or maybe a year before we met criterion, right? So we didn't do it at this property. If we did, Leslie wouldn't be replacing ceiling tiles 3 days a week, right? With leaks, right? Or the hope would be that that's not what happened. We would have found that some of these roofs need to be replaced, or we would have found that some of these HVAC units were, you know, far past their useful life, and we would have replaced them, right? So, you know, the past
But
is.
we would put it in the budget to start with.
Yeah,
That's
we would
easier
put,
that way.
we would put it to begin with, as opposed to piecemealing it now or doing them as they die. And that's you know, like Dave said, it prevents things from coming up in the future. One of the biggest things that I love about doing it this way and operating this way is that we're doing things proactively, right? So like what he brought up a lot last week with the verdant system is us being proactive with our residents and tenants of, we know when their HVAC unit is going to go down, right? So all that does is just impacts our retention in a positive way, because we are proactively coming to fix a problem that we know is coming up, right? So this report allows us to be proactive, a proactive management company when others, you know, aren't, right? So I think it separates us from the pack and just, you know, catapults Greenleaf ahead of some of the other operators.
Well, thank you so much, Mark, and everybody for attending today. This concludes our regularly scheduled program. We will probably see everybody later at bowling. So farewell for now. But if you have any additional questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. We hope everybody has a great day, and we'll see you later. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
See y'all.